2000s, parks were competing at breakneck speed for all types of superlatives. The fastest, the tallest, the steepest, the most inversions. But now, to the dismay of coaster fans like me, they're a dying breed. Or at least, they're becoming less common. And in their place,
more rides like this, which is great for people like me who can't go on any coaster without needing to lie down afterwards. Thanks to the roller coaster database, we looked at every coaster built in the US going all the way back to 1980 and found two interesting trends. One, that holy moly, we were building so many coasters in the late 90s and early 2000s. And two, that kid-friendly rides are becoming a bigger and bigger proportion of all new coasters. Even though Kyla and I will never agree on what makes a good coaster, we decided to team up to figure out why amusement parks are seemingly getting more boring. For her. Not for me. This is great for me. So we dove into the wild coaster history and data, visited some iconic parks ourselves.
This is a very competitive industry.
And even spoke to some real-life coaster engineers.
We're seeing an increase in parks wanting something that's family-friendly.
The answer? Well, much like the coasters themselves, it's been a wild ride to please evolving customer tastes. It stars money, obviously, an iconic coaster company, and one very particular type of steel. Coasters have changed a lot over the years. As in, they've gone from Russian peasants sliding down 600-foot ice ramps to this. The first coaster boom peaked in the 1920s. Various tech breakthroughs from prior decades saw some 1,500 coasters built across the country, all competing to be the fastest, longest, or tallest scream machine. These were all built with intricate wooden supports and flat wooden tracks on top, sometimes with flat steel on top of those to make for a smoother ride. How smooth? Well, to find out, I hopped a train to the legendary Coney Island to visit this bad boy, the Cyclone. The Cyclone is one of the few remaining wooden coasters from its era, so of course I had to go ride it. Except I can't.
Because on top of being terribly motion sick, I'm also pregnant. You can't ride anything when you're pregnant.
So I got my coworkers to ride it instead.
What'd you think?
That was way more fun than I thought it was going to be, this old 100-year-old coaster.
So iconic? Yes. But the Cyclone and its contemporaries are super different from modern rides. They were pretty rickety and unreliable, and the parks themselves were seen as kind of gross and seedy, not really a place you'd bring the fam for spring break. All in all, I'm not sure parks at this time did a great job appealing to either audience demographic. The 1-2 punch of the Great Depression and World War II further devastated theme parks. Discretionary income didn't exist, and any building materials went to the war effort. Most of those old wooden coasters were demolished, and the whole idea, it seemed, was on its way out. Until one man with a mouse and a dream opened a new type of coaster. One that not only revolutionized coaster engineering, but set off a new arms race altogether.
After the war, Walt Disney was convinced he could turn family-fun amusement parks into vacation destinations. To do so, he partnered with a small machine shop, Arrow, run by two veterans with more experience making weapons of war than kiddie rides. 6 of Disneyland's original rides were built and designed by Arrow, but the real breakthrough came 6 years later. Meet the Matterhorn bobsleds. Gentle enough that even Karin might enjoy it, which is exactly what Disney wanted. It certainly doesn't have the types of thrills we've come to expect from modern coasters. But at the time, it absolutely changed everything. Here's how. Disney insisted that the real ride needed to feel like a real bobsled down the real Matterhorn, or as close as you could get in Southern California. And it needed to fit neatly inside of this fake mountain that Disney was already building. Traditional coasters really couldn't accomplish that with their flat planks of wood and steel. So Arrow had to invent an entirely new type of track using tubular steel. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's steel that's in a tubular shape and therefore can be twisted into any shape that you need. This made for a smoother, gentler ride, and it accomplished exactly what Disney wanted, to feel like bobsleds. And it was a smashing hit.
Now, Disney, of course, was using this technology to make rides that would be fun for me and my kids, not Kyla. But this tubular steel got other amusement parks thinking. They could twist it into taller, scarier, and overall more extreme rides. The type of ride I would never go near. So Disney and Aero created an accidental revolution, spawning basically every roller coaster since. None of these would be possible without tubular steel. Being first to the market, Aero initially dominated the coaster wars. But in 1989, the company peaked, both figuratively and literally, with this. Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point, the first complete circuit coaster to surpass 200 feet in height. This record was quickly surpassed, such that today, 200 feet is the bare minimum to be one of the top 10 tallest coasters in the United States. But at the time, it was big news. Unfortunately for Aero, this time period also saw lots of new coaster companies coming on the scene to push the limits. Knott's Berry Farm sold Aero's famous Corkscrew to make room for Boomerang, a coaster made by the Dutch company Vekoma, a company with which Aero had previously partnered to manufacture its tubular steel tracks in Europe. It really seems like by the 1990s, the coaster war unleashed by its own technology had gotten away from Aero. Aero tried to boost sales with cheaper Wild Mouse-style rides, but only sold 4. The 1999 opening of Tennessee Tornado at Dollywood seemed like a big upswing, but then the company finally overstretched themselves with X.
This is the X2 coaster. It's so extreme that a fan wrote a guide of how to ride it painlessly, and it represents a whole new era in coaster construction.
This was supposed to be a rebirth of sorts for Aero, akin almost to the Matterhorn bobsleds in terms of its innovation. See, X, now called X2 after a $10 million renovation in 2007, is the world's first 4D coaster, meaning its riders are... it's probably easier if we just show you.
Aero wasn't initially planning to build such a big coaster, but they adjusted their plans at Magic Mountain's insistence. But Aero couldn't keep up and filed for bankruptcy in December 2001. Even with Aero's fall, their coaster wars didn't stop. In fact, they hit their peak. Parks kept pushing the limits of what's physically possible for both construction materials and the human body. Just look at any of the record-holding roller coasters. Most were built around the late 1990s to the early 2010s. Like this one, or this one, or this one, Superman Escape from Krypton, which has been very popular since opening in 1997 here at Six Flags Magic Mountain. But I can't ride it anymore because it's been closed down since September 2024. It turns out this coaster frenzy wasn't just the high point, it was the beginning of the end. The records were getting harder to break, the costs were getting harder to justify. And there were not enough people who wanted to ride these monsters. Parks don't really break out the number of people that ride a roller coaster every year, but based on the number of rides that are getting knocked down, we have to assume the ROI isn't that high. The coaster wars had reached their final loop. So park and ride designers had to pivot.
There has always been a battle to have the biggest and longest and tallest roller coaster. But I will say we're maxing out those records.
This is Chris Reynolds, a coaster engineer at S&S in Logan, Utah. S&S got into the coaster game when it bought some of Aero's IP after its bankruptcy.
Parks still want new, unique, thrilling rides, but there's also a revitalization in what can the family do? What's fun for the family? What's fun that I can take my kids on? Because we're not all teenagers anymore.
We like the idea that more of the people going to a park can all ride the roller coaster, especially together. We like those memories being made as a family together rather than saying, hey, we're gonna go ride this, wait for us. Let's all ride it together and have a better time, which is why they came and makes them wanna come back.
Plus, family-friendly coasters are less expensive to build and insure, which is a huge plus as theme parks continue to recover after the pandemic. Even S&S's latest technology, an Axis coaster, can run the gamut from kid-friendly to super intense.
So this is our prototype Axis coaster. The seats on this ride, they rotate side to side. So if I come here and push it, you can kind of see the way it rotates. On the back of these, we have these magnetic dampers. So that keeps you from whipping too hard coming out of turns and whatnot. My oldest child, when she was probably 5, I took her on our Axis prototype and she loved it. But it is not everyone's cup of tea. That prototype is high thrill. When I'm looking at designing a family roller coaster or we're looking at a family ride, we stick around more of that 2.8 to 3 Gs. You don't want to make a little kid go through something that's super intense.
So how much are parks building rides for little kids and their grandparents? To find out, we crunched the numbers.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, we looked at all the coasters built in the US going back to 1980 and found that a greater proportion of them from about the early mid-2000s onward are what we would consider kid-friendly, meaning they have height restrictions of under 48 inches. But I also zoomed into the post-2020 rides, and I found that of all the coasters categorized as thrill, 8 of them allow on kids as short as 36 inches, and that's about 3 to 4 years old. I'm just saying, if I were in charge of categorizing roller coasters, I'd class anything that allows on 3 to 4-year-olds as family-friendly. Why this major shift towards family-friendly rides? Well, we came up with a few reasons that explain it, with some help from this guy.
Some people refer to me in the articles, in the media, and the investment community as Mr. Theme Park. My company has worked on over 500 projects in more than 55, probably 60 countries by now. We had been coming through that period of longer, higher, faster for about 8 or 9 years. And quite frankly, I think the public got a little tired of hearing that.
With so many new, exciting rides, it became harder for any one coaster to justify its cost.
Is there some sort of return on investment calculation that could exist for parks?
We are expecting on a major implementation of a coaster to see somewhere around a 3 to 5% increase in attendance, with retail spending increasing behind that. That carries forward for 2 or 3 years. And hopefully within that period, you've paid that ride off. But as we've matured and the coaster has become more common, believe it or not, that percentage has dropped down.
But ultimately, I think the primary reason for this shift was summed up by the Six Flags CEO way back in 2006. I love our heritage of thrill rides, but we can't alienate the families. And I think Six Flags has done a bit of that. As fun as thrill rides are, again for the Kylas of the world, not for me, they appeal to a narrower demographic, one that also has less disposable income. And after the pandemic slump, Six Flags was still trying to overcome the teenage hurdle.
In an earnings call, the new CEO said that the company was still trying to shed its old reputation as a daycare center for teenagers. What does this add up to? Parks have gotten smart about demographics. Little kids, their parents, their grandparents. We haven't stopped building coasters. We just started building more kinds of fun for more people.
Coaster is still king. We continue to see 38 new coasters in the U.S. and 180 or so globally. I mean, they're not falling off. They're still growing. And as long as the manufacturers continue to add new twists and turns, literally, people will keep riding.
You can see this in action in Illinois.
So we're here today to see the Wrath of Rakshasa.
Let's do one more. It's Rakshasa?
So we're here to see the unveiling of the Wrath of Rakshasa. We're here today to see the Wrath of Rakshasa. And so hopefully we'll get some answers around the economics of the roller coaster. This has the steepest inversion of any roller coaster in the world.
So right now we're still working on rod erection. Roughly we've got about a dozen pieces of track left to go. So hopefully about another week and a half worth of ride erection. And then we can start moving into site development. So getting close to the finish line.
Are you able to talk about budget stuff, or is that, yeah?
The general statement is it's in line with all of our new coasters that we're building. It's a significant investment.
You always got to do it bigger and better and different, right? So we wanted to do that. So the current record is actually 95 degrees on the dive coaster. So why don't we just go 96, and then boom, now it's another world record and something that hasn't been done before. We want to build big thrill rides, not just for thrill seekers, because really grandma is going to probably sit down and watch your things while you go and ride the ride, and she needs to have some entertainment too. So that's why it's great that it's right over the midway. You can stare straight up at people doing that dive at 96 degrees and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to go on that. I'm good. But I'm going to watch my family, right?
These days, even when they're building a scary new ride, grandma matters just as much to Six Flags as their teenage grandkids.
Funnily enough, the thrill-loving teens from the earlier era and the parents with small children of today, these two demographics, are the same people. But generally, millennials are a huge generation, and we've gained a lot of spending power lately. Not the most spending power, but we're a close second behind Gen X. We've already driven surges in other industries like baby products, minivans, and smaller houses. But for our fun money, we like experiences. So we're still flocking to the destination Disneys and the regional Six Flags alike. And parks have taken notice, overhauling not just their rides, but their in-park offerings, like food and drinks, to cater specifically to us. Which honestly seems pretty smart to me. As the designated waiting outside the ride person, it's nice to know I can pass the time with some fancy and expensive drinks and snacks. Cheers.
My toxic trait is that hot dogs always smell good to me. I know they're trash, garbage, but I always want one.
Okay, so we're here today to see the unveiling of the Wrath of Rakshasa. The Wrath of Rakshasa. The Wrath of Rakshasa. The Wrath of Rakshasa. The Wrath of Rakshasa.
You're doing it.
The Wrath of Rakshasa. The Wrath of Okay.